Hey, what's up? Welcome back. In this episode, we're just going to play around a little bit with the data that you can get from Zillow. They have an official API, but I find that it's super limiting and it really just gives you search results. And what I want to see is this map that they have on Zillow, but I want to see it with, instead of just like a little icon for the school, I want to know the rating, the like 9 out of 10 or, 7 out of 10 or whatever. I want to see that on the map. I don't want to just see this little head on the map. So I don't know if we want to just hack this from the browser or play around just to kind of like mess around with it directly here. But what I wanted to do is just the first thing I do generally when I'm trying to figure out how I can get at this data is I'll open the dev console. So on this page, you can open this up with Command Option I. On Mac, you can right click and inspect. And when you're viewing some data like this, you'll see that like as you move the map around, API calls are being fired off. Sometimes those are going to be like done over WebSockets or something. You can also filter out those responses. Sometimes you also need to like refresh the page so you can see all of the network requests, and you can preserve the log for those. And there's a ton that's coming down here. We've got, there's just a whole bunch of API calls that are firing off. And so one thing that you might want to do is filter off to exclude like JPEGs or pings or whatever, scripts, PNGs, fetch, etc. Or actually, we want fetch. We want the XHRs because generally when they're using Google Maps here on the background. You can see map data 2021. They're going to be fetching some JSON from some service somewhere and then loading that onto the map using JavaScript at some point. And what's really bad about their public API, or that makes it frustrating to work with, is it doesn't give you JSON, it gives you back XML. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of like poke around the data that you can get back when you're fetching some results. So we see this get search page state, and there's like a whole bunch of arguments that are being passed in here. And the data that you get back, you can look at the response tab. Well, sometimes you can preview it, sometimes you can't, I guess. My guess is that there's like too much data. So if we scroll like way in, so there's just like fewer results. And then if we scroll to the bottom, my guess is that we're going to see some other get page results. Okay, so now we can see the response, and here's the preview. So we've got information about the user, the school results. So I turned on the schools by like messing around here. And in the school results, we can see there's two schools, Academy of Learning and Technology and the high school version of Academy and Learning Technology. And they are not rated. So what I wanted to do was just take this API call and reproduce it locally and try to figure out what all the arguments are that are being passed in when this get request is happening. So from the headers tab here, we can see all the general information about the request. We see the URL to which the request was sent. Then we see that it is a get method. We got back a 200 status code. Here's the IP address and the port. And here's a bunch of headers. So what I want to do is I'm just going to grab this whole URL and I am going to open up Postman. So this is odd. The zoom in hotkey doesn't work, but okay. So once we're zoomed in, we've got a new collection here. Let's add a new request. And I'm just going to say this is like fetch page. I don't actually know what the stuff on the page is. And then hit enter. And we can actually see the request. The request went out and we got back some results. So we see the request ID is 6. And we can see all of the results down here. This is the JSON that was returned. And we can also see the search query state is this giant value that's being passed along in the query string. And I recognize this as some sort of base64 encoded something. So we might just say like URL decoder, and then we can paste in that value and say decode. And here we go, we've got back something. And it looks like it's actually JSON being passed as like just URL encoded JSON as one of the query string values that's being passed. And we get, we're passing in a map bounds for left and right. We're passing in, east, west, south, and north. That's kind of like all of our corners of the map. And we have a zoom level. And so we've got these school results, and those give us the lat long, attendance zones, et cetera, et cetera. So so that's how we would just kind of reverse engineer, I guess, this get page state thing that's firing on Zillow. So why don't we let's try and mess around with the map bounds, I think. And yeah, let's grab some bigger map bounds. So let's zoom all the way out. So we will zoom out. As we zoomed so far out, there was a ton of data, and I'm sure we were like hitting some sort of memory limits or something. So what we really want is just this sort of the pagination or the page state query string variable when we're zoomed further out, so that we can pipe this into our query here. And now we should be able to see, yeah, we see a much bigger JSON file that has 36,000 lines. All right, so let's just take a look and see if we can take this JSON file and use it to plot some stuff on a map. So we will say we're going to save the response to a file, response.json in. All right, so we'll jump into that directory and we have our response there. Now, what I think might make sense is to create an index.html and try to figure out how to add a map to this page with Google Maps. So let's go look at the Google Maps API, and we'll pull up the documentation for this. I know that you have to have an API key now, I believe, to get this up and running. Okay, we've got our map, we've got our map height. Ooh, your API key. Click to insert. Okay, so I'm inserting that with my API key. And now we should be able to load this map, maybe. Oh, we got to restart our server. And nothing. Okay, so then we have our map element. Okay, so here's where we have to like actually create the map. All right, so we'll come over here. We'll write some JavaScript in here. Oh, this is, okay, so this was what was, we were just not calling init map. Okay. Sources, index.js. Okay, oh, as HTML element. So this is another, okay, that was another TypeScript thing that we didn't actually need. Okay, so we are zoomed in on a very specific point. It says Google is not defined, even though we're loading it after. All right, so we have a map. It's zoomed in on this location. We actually want to center it based on our response JSON. So I have this giant JSON file. I'm in Vim. I'm actually going to just visually select the whole thing and then pipe it to JQ, and it should pretty print it. So that's a nice way to format JSON, is just using JQ. Okay, so we've got some map state, and this is, at least this gives us a lat long that we could pin to. So let's do that. We'll just say this is our lat, and our long is this-ish, and that should at least give us a starting point. And then the zoom, I think, was level 8, but we'll see. So if we refresh the page here, I don't know if we need to start this over. Okay, cool. So this is in the right-ish spot. Okay, we don't actually need the pin there, though. So what we can do is we can just remove the marker. And okay, so now we've got a map showing up. It's roughly in the spot that we want. We want to like read in this JSON response and then do something with it. So I think if I go to like /response.json, yeah, okay, so that pulls all the JSON data. And then if I wanted to like iterate over it, so inside of index.js here, what I want to do is I want to, after we've initialized the map, actually I think I want to just have a global reference to the map. So let's change that to do this. Okay, so after we initialize the map, we want to fetch response.json, and then we want to like iterate over different pieces, parts and pieces of it. So I want to say something like function get school data or something like that, or just get fetch data maybe. And we'll make this an async function. And inside here, we will say, I don't know, the data is await. Actually, we can just say fetch slash response.json. And that should fetch the data. And I'm actually going to await it this way. So I'm going to say const data is await that thing, and we'll console.log data. That should get us started. So we'll refresh the page here, go to our console. Google is not defined. Okay, so why is that giving us trouble? Oh, okay. So I think this init map function is actually being called by this here, callback init map. So we should just need to refresh the, okay, so we're refreshing the page. All right, so now inside of index.js, we need to call fetch data. Okay. All right, so then we refresh and we see the data here. We've got user map state, school results. So the school results.schools. So here I can say school results. So we'll just decompose the school results, and we want to pull off the schools. And we want to iterate over the list of schools. So we're going to say like school results.schools.map or something. School is going to do something, console.log school. So let's just see if we can check out all the schools. All right, so there we got all the schools, and we can see their name and students per teacher, 5.8. Wow, that is a low, that is a low student to teacher ratio. That's wild. Okay, so we see the attendance zones. We see that it's PK. There's no GS rating. So GS, I think, stands for good schools. And that's like the tool that Zillow uses. Great schools, yeah, right here. This is like the link to that actual school. So attendance zones, I'm sure that's probably some sort of like boundary around where that school is actually located. So I think what makes most sense is trying to, well, let's just exclude the ones that don't have a good schools rating, and we'll just ignore those. So let's filter where GS rating does not equal null. And then we'll console log all of those so that we can just see the ones that have good schools ratings. Okay, so this one's a 7. This one is a 10. Wow, 10. Okay, great. So now what we want to do is we want to take all of those schools, const schools with ratings, and then we want to place them on the map. So we have the location. The location is this lat long. And so we want to use the lat long to create a pin that represents the school, and we want to like change the content of the pin to be the actual school rating. Now we want to go back to the Google Maps API documentation, the very first thing that we were looking at, because we do want to draw a pin. Okay, add a map marker with JS. So we want to use this marker situation. So we're going to pass in the map, and then we're going to pass in the position. And a position is defined by lat long, just like that. And I think that our data actually spits it out like that, just lat long. So I think we can do something like maybe even schools with, well, let's just keep it like this. Yeah, so then we can say schools with ratings dot for each. And we're going to try to map them out. So the position is going to be s.location, and the map is going to be map. Let's just see what that does. Google is not defined. Oh, because I'm running this before Okay, so I'm gonna move fetch data inside of init map. So what's gonna happen is the page is gonna load, Google Maps JavaScript is gonna load asynchronously, and then at the end of its loading, it's gonna call this init map callback function. Oh gosh, okay, so this script is loading some JavaScript onto the page asynchronously, and when it's done, it's gonna call our callback function, and that callback function is that JavaScript that we want to run. And when that JavaScript function runs, it's gonna initialize the map, and then we're at the end of initializing the map, we wanna call fetch data, because that we don't want to try to put things onto the map, and we don't wanna create markers until the Google Maps JavaScript is fully loaded. Hopefully that makes sense. Cannot read property of undefined, reading location. Okay, for each schools with ratings. Oh, I was just logging that out. Okay, so we want to just return this. Set position, not a lat long literal. Long is not a number. Okay, so all right, let's see if we're getting back some bad lat long values here. What? Okay, set position, not lat long or lat long literal in property long. Oh, okay. So we're passing lat and lon with an on, and I think it's expecting lng. Is that right? So Google is expecting lng, and we're passing lon. So we need to deconstruct this. Yeah, so we're going to say const lat lon is equal to s.location. So we'll pull off the lat and long, because we're going to, like, eventually we're going to want the school so that we can put other stuff about the good school rating and stuff. So position here is going to be then lat, and long is lon. I think that's what's up. Boom, look at that. Okay, we've got pins all over the place. Holy moly. Okay, so now what we want to do is, how do we mess around with the pin to put stuff on inside of the pin? Marker labels. Oh, there we go, marker labels. That's what we want, label. So we want the label to be s.gs rating. No? Doesn't look like that's working. Label. Oh, maybe it needs to be a string? .to string. There we go. Bingo. Bingo, bango. Look at that. That is so cool. Okay, so now we can sort of see all of the schools with the GS ratings just in this little tiny map area with some data that we fetched and pulled down. So yeah, hopefully this was interesting. It's kind of fun to play around with this data and just visualize it differently. So yeah, hopefully that was fun and interesting. If it was, I would love a thumbs up. And yeah, until next time, we'll catch you later.